an athlete running towards you, and you're shooting at 12 frames a second rather than 6 frames a second, that's going to make a difference. So we can talk about that as well.
Can we?
Yeah.
You mean like right now?
Sure.
I think the green light's on.
The green light is on.
and we're on. So we might be able to talk about that right now.
Absolutely.
Cool. No, I just think that there's lots of bullshit that is banded around, especially by people who want to sell things to any market, okay? Because that's called sales and marketing. And we all watch some people buy things, and you just go,
why'd you do that?
What by buying that? Buying that is going to give you what?
Yeah.
Over what you had before.
Well, you know, just in terms of the technological advancements, if you look at how much things have improved and how much cheaper they've got, that's also made. It's democratized photography. It's democratized a lot of things. It's not only photography.
Exactly.
So I think this conversation really needs to be seen holistically in terms of the global evolution of technology. And I really don't want to go. I mean, I don't know enough about technology and stuff like that
But you don't have to know about technology to be able to be a critique of the effect of technology.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to understand code
No.
to be able to understand that smartphones are probably not very good for us, and we worked that out in less than 10 years.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you don't have to have a PhD in tech to know that the effect of some tech is actually really bad.
Yes. Yes.
So you are qualified.
Okay. And I have 2 children, so I can see.
And they're exactly that age, aren't they?
Well, they are exactly the age that technology affects them immensely. And I've got 2 boys with completely polar opposite personalities. The one is sport mad, and what we have to appreciate in terms of our generation, that television, mainstream television, almost doesn't exist in a teenager's life anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you say to them, when you're sitting on the couch watching TV and you say, get off your phone, you're always on your phone, they're not really on their phone, they're watching TV. That's their version of TV. That's their version of us watching the news. Yeah. You know, so it's just completely changed everything. But my one son is very, very sporty, and he 22 hours a week on the tennis court, and the other one is more of the academic. So he is inside a lot, and the technology has it's impossible to deny the fact that this generation is growing up in a completely different world to the way we grew up. But in terms of camera equipment, because that's how we started this conversation, initially, you kind of alluded to the fact that technology has got to a point where basically every camera that's coming out these days, including camera phones, are, the quality is right up there with you could take a shot from an iPhone and put it on the front cover of a magazine, if your lighting conditions are right and that kind of thing. I think in terms of the technology with camera equipment, when it does matter, is things like low light conditions. Thank goodness that wasn't me.
Let me just call her.
Okay.
Hello. I'm okay. I'm actually doing a podcast right now. So I can't talk right now, but can I give you a call maybe later or tomorrow? I'll send you a text when I'm finished, okay? Yeah, I knew I should have done something. I should have put my phone on silent. Sorry, man. Sorry about that.
Well, clearly it's live.
Look, at least it's live, man.
Yeah. Yeah, so back to the notion that all cameras are the same. All cameras are created equal. I understand that under perfect lighting conditions with a stationary subject and all things being equal, then the differential is not that much. It is when it starts to get tricky.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's when it gets to
there
low
is a
light.
context in which you will magnify the differences between them. But the good thing in this discussion is you see this situation from the polar opposite to me. I only care about the photography for the two-dimensional set of pixels, X and Y pixels that it produces. So the image in a RAW converter or in Photoshop has no umbilical cord back to the sensor that produced it. It's just a bunch of pixels.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Photoshop doesn't know that this pixel comes from a Fuji camera, and so I'm going to treat it differently. It's just a bunch of pixels.
Yeah.
And so I treat it because it's an emotive thing, right? I mean, I could get 10 different photographers in here and have a discussion on the importance of hardware, and you would get 10 slightly different views, and sometimes maybe very different views. My view is that if it is not possible for anybody to be able to look at a picture and tell me what camera it came from, what lens was used, what software was used, or anything else, all I say is maybe the disproportionate what I see, the reverence in which I see a lot of people holding their kit, thinking that if I buy this kit, it's going to make me a better photographer. The proportion of that changes.
Does that not happen in your industry?
What?
If you buy this Wacom tablet, or if you buy this...
No, because the Wacom doesn't create an image, does it?
But it helps you get to your
but
final...
I see two people sometimes, and I'm going to see it next week in Photokina. I'm going to see people nearly coming to blows that their Nikon is better than Canon, and just as I used to in the graphic design industry when Quark and InDesign were, you know, vying.
Yeah, but don't you think from a humanity perspective that's tribalism?
Of course. So it is human nature. It's applied in everything.
So is it really about the hardware?
What I'm saying is that I could pull up a picture here right now, and you would be an elevated photographer. You know what I mean? You're up there.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to tell me by looking at a picture.
I'd be able to tell you if it was shot by a decent camera or not.
How?
If it's in low light conditions and I can see details in the shadows, details in the... Then you can say, well, yeah.
Yeah, but there's the same amount of detail in the shadow. The only difference between low light and large amount of light is the noise that is produced. Mm-hmm. Noise doesn't obliterate detail, it just contaminates the detail, doesn't it? So the same detail is there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's just different terminology for what I'm trying to
What I'm saying is you can still see the detail.
Yeah, but if you had a camera that shot better in low light in terms of
less
noise,
smoother.
Yeah, so then I could say, well, that camera, you know, that's
that camera might be better, but that doesn't mean that camera takes a better shot. To me, a better shot is taken by a human with a creative eye, who points their camera and calibrates their camera at something that is interesting. That's got nothing to do with the kit.
Not everything's interesting though. You could be using a camera for something completely inane.
Well, like you were more of a documentary photographer, you're a forensic photographer, right?
Yes.
So you're taking things of factual significance, okay? Correct. So then you're not really looking at ambience and everything, you're just going, okay, that shows...
Yeah, I don't want to bring emotion into it specifically.
Yeah, but that's not the kind of photography, I think, what we're talking about here. I'm talking about when somebody, as an art form, an image that makes me want to look at it a little bit longer. Let's just say Instagram, for instance. So we pull up Instagram, and you know it's from an image person's point of view, and I just go, shit. And then every once in a while, I'll see an image, and I would just.
It'll make you feel something.
And I would just stop a little bit longer, linger on that image, because it has managed to grab my attention. Mm-hmm. That's an emotional connection.
Yes.
I don't. When I'm looking at that one image thinking, why do I like that? I don't sit there and go, oh, it was because it was the latest camera, or oh, they must have been using a really cool lens, or you know what I mean? They've managed to take a picture of something that is of interest to me.
Yeah, but yes, and when you're sifting through mountains of rubbish on the internet, if you come across like Martin Schroeder's work, who is for me one of the greatest photographers around, his work is emotive because of its consistency and because the quality is bang on every single time. So it stands out from everything else. And I know, I mean, he's using the right amount of lights, the right camera and all that kind of thing. He's not using substandard equipment. But I get what you're saying. But you could also look at it from cars perspective. You could look at it from anything. You could look at it from toasters.
Well, I look at it like computers. When I first started 25 years ago with desktop computers and Apple, the difference between the bottom of the range computer and the top range computer was a very large amount of money.
Significant.
And because of the base level of speed, it would be physically impossible for you to retouch a picture on the lowest spec machine. So the question, which machine do I need, was a valid one. Today, that is nearly gone, because you can buy the bottom of the range Apple Mac and you can do anything on it. Now the bar is set to, do you do three-dimensional ray tracing rendering?
All the time.
You know what I mean? If you do that kind of stuff, then that context means you probably need to put your hand in your pocket, dig a bit deeper and buy the one with the extra cores, the higher amount of RAM, because that will help you in that specific tiny niche. But now to do video editing or to do picture editing, you can buy the cheapest, crappiest kind of looking computer anywhere.
Okay, so if the differential has diminished and the difference between one brand and another brand is less significant in terms of what you actually see, what you're actually buying now is you're buying into the culture of that company, you're buying into the brand of that company, you're buying into things like after-sales service. If you build a relationship with that brand, and I can only speak from my personal relationship with Nikon, my introduction to Nikon, I don't think I've really spoken too much about this, but when I was a police photographer, the government didn't issue us cameras. I had to go and buy my own camera. So I had a point and shoot, a little point and shoot. In Afrikaans we say mik en druk. It means aim and press. And one day while I was shooting, now you have to understand that when you are in a position where you know everything that's going on politically in a country where more people are dying per capita than in Bosnia at the time, it's the most dangerous place on earth, and there's massive media attention there. The journalists want to become friends with you because you can then give them information as to what's going on in the areas. So a photojournalist befriended me, mutually beneficial, the relationship, because I managed to sell some pictures that maybe I shouldn't have, but you know, we all hustle in the way that we do. One day he said to me, why are you shooting with this, you know, point and shoot fixed focal length camera? I said, well, you know, that's the way it is. So he said, oh, here you go, have one of my old ones. And he gave me a Nikon F3 with a 55mm manual focus, manual aperture macro lens, and a 135mm portrait lens, also manual focus. And geez, to this day, I still use my 55mm macro lens, and it looks like it was made in like 1960 or something like that. If we can pull one up, and I'll try and show you it. I keep that in my camera bag, and I use it every time I go on a shoot. I open that camera bag, and I see that lens, and I think every single time, just remember where you came from. Remember your roots. And that camera to this day even works on the brand new mirrorless camera because of the lens mounts and everything there. But that's irrelevant. That was my introduction to Nikon. After the F3, then I was like, okay, wow, this is really cool. And I saved up enough money to buy a second-hand F4. And then the 70-200, 2.8, and I started to really get into the photographic side of things. f5, and then obviously when digital came out, the D100, which was shocking at the time. And that, you know,
I have one in there.
You got one?
Yeah.
People were like, digital will never take off, right? And you know, we went from 1 gig micro, the ceramic drive SD, not SD, the micro drives. Like if you drop it, it's done.
Those, yeah.
And those were like 600 euros or 600 pounds for 1 gig memory card.
Yeah.
And then I went obviously D100, D200, all the way up to what we're on now. The reason I stuck with that brand was because it works, but all the other brands work as well, but it was because of my relationship with the brand. And it's not, for me, it's an emotional relationship, because I'm a very emotional person. But that that brand was there for me at the beginning of my career.
Yeah. So you stick with it.
That camera, this is so ridiculous. That camera was there. The F3 took the first photograph I took of my wife when we went on our first date. We went back into the studio. I was like, I'm a photographer. Look at my studio. Brought out my hipster F3 because you know, I didn't want to bring out the F4 because that looks like it's like a big proper commercial photographer. I bring out my little hipster F3, load it all up, put it onto 2/50ths of a second. Put my lights up, take some shots of her. Turn this way, turn that way, you know. And I'm trying to impress this woman that I've just fallen in love with, and lo and behold, realized when the film came back from the lab that the flash sync speed of the F3 is 1/25th, not 250. So and the shutter went this way, not this way. So I had all these half pictures of her. Fortunately, the top half, and I was like, yeah, I did that like on purpose so I could get squares, you know. It was like, but the Nikon was there with me. On my first date, it was there at my wedding. It was, you know, stuff like pictures of like when my kids just got born.
It's interesting though, because you say the word Nikon as if it was a bunch of people that came and supported you in a way. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's an inanimate object which doesn't have a personality, but we attribute.
Of course you do.
We project those things on it, and then they then become the essential thing that you can't do without. You know what I mean? But,
yes, because
it makes
doesn't make no sense. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense whatsoever,
No.
because it is just a camera. Get some black insulating tape and stick it over the word Nikon. It could be anything.
Yeah,
but it's our transferring.
Yeah, it's our projection.
Yeah.
And if you're happy with that, then that's cool. What is, you know, if that works for me, happy days. You know, but
it was the same with me with hi-fis.
Yeah,
with Sony, with Nike, you know, if I'm going to buy running gear, I lean. It doesn't have to be Nike.
Yeah.
But once X amount of your stuff is one brand, then
but that's the OCD. That's the OCD section of it. Yeah?
So when I'm going down the shopping centre, like I did today, because I want to look for some more running kind of stuff, it was I'll go to the Nike store.
Yeah, but go to the one in Osdorp because it's like 30% cheaper, and if you buy by the end of this month, really, I just got some new shorts this month, 2 weeks ago, because I'm running Chicago, so I had to, you know, and it's all color coordinated.
It has to be.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that relationship with a brand, there's not a lot of loyalty left in the world, you know. If you look at relationships. A lot of relationships, interhuman relationships, don't last, you know, 10 years, 15 years, or something like that. So, in some way, regardless of me being a Nikon ambassador, because I've been a Nikon ambassador for 10 years now, and the relationship that I've been a Nikon ambassador at all the Nikon branches because I work with Nikon Europe, Nikon South Africa, Nikon Middle East and Africa. I've been at Nikon longer than any of those people, so you know, in terms of loyalty.
But I think I think there is a differential between consumer loyalty and professional loyalty to brand. I think as a consumer, we're a lot more fickle. We can easily jump from one brand to another in our consumer lives, but in our professional life, I think it's a completely different story.
Yeah, unless you're Roger Federer and you get offered $300 million to change.
Well, that's an entirely different thing. No, I just think that, when I see what Apple have changed into over the decades that I've been using their equipment, and representing them for a large amount of time at shows and things, they're now a consumer-based company. They're not a professional-based company. They don't cater for the professional market anymore. They don't mention anywhere in their literature, anywhere in their presentations. They never talk about the graphic design industry.
Okay, but I have an opinion.
They only talk about consumers.
Yeah, but I have an opinion on that, and that really is very similar to a garage band that goes mainstream. So initially, Apple was formed rebellion, and it was based on rebellion. But as soon as
why rebellion?
Because they didn't want to go with IBM. They were fighting IBM, small, David versus Goliath, little startup in a garage, that kind of mentality. And they had a core group of followers who were creative people. You've got the graphic designers, the photographers, all those, the core group of what society would determine as not mainstream type of people. They would be more the rebels and the creative type of people. I mean, you were really cool if you worked at an advertising agency because they had Macs.
Yeah, but I come from that era, so I see that time in a completely different way. Yeah. As I said to you today when we were walking back here from our meal, I remember Photoshop 1 on a floppy disk, and it was only on Mac. It wasn't written for PCs because there was no way of making a PC run that application and guaranteeing that all PCs would be able to run it because they just weren't powerful enough. Mac had a different strategy of their multiple processors having different processors with different responsibilities, or shedding the load from the main processor instead of the PC, which is one slightly faster processor but has to give it multiple tasks. Apple fragmented the processing power and made it possible that a computer could work for the design industry. And so I worked at a company at the leading edge at the time of this tidal wave of wanting Quark to work instead of the big systems that I used to work on prior to that, which were multi-million-pound installations to be able to do pre-press work. PCs weren't able to do the job, and because of the software comes from one company, the hardware comes from multiple companies. Yeah. The lack of reliability of Windows-based machines in the beginning was you couldn't base a business on that because they used to fall over every 5 seconds. So the Mac, because it was a closed architecture, proprietary, meant you could secure a business on the fact that at least the thing's going to work all the time. It may not be as open for you to manipulate, but it's dependable.
Okay,
and that's what gave them the edge.
Yes, but they had a very niche market. They weren't targeting home users at the time.
Well, no,
when they first started.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what happens? That's like a garage band that tries and has a very niche market and has got 100 people outside their garage listening to them, and then they what they did worked. And they then become mainstream, and all their initial core followers are like, sell out. Well, you've sold your soul, you're a sellout. And then they go mainstream.
No, I think if I was a shareholder at Apple, I would have done the same thing.
Of course you would have done the same thing.
I would have been a bean counting individual who just wants to make the most amount of money from my opportunity. So if I transport myself into that position, into a different person, personally I would never do that. But I just feel that they have placed themselves in an incredibly fragile position because consumers' degree of brand loyalty is a fraction of what a professional person's brand loyalty will be. Whether it's a musician who always uses a particular brand of guitar, or me in the software, and the fact that I know that I can get a Wacom, and I know that I can get an equivalent of a Wacom tablet at a fraction of the price if I buy these Chinese rip-offs, where they basically just copy exactly the same thing and sell it for a fraction of the price. I just wouldn't buy one of those on principle. Just on principle, I wouldn't buy one. But Apple now,
if you were 20 and you didn't have any other option.
Exactly. But at 20, you're not actually really a hardened professional yet, and you're not making those kind of decisions, are you? My point is that
I beg to differ, because there's a lot of 20-year-olds that think they've been around for,
of course. I can remember being 20 thinking I knew everything, and now I just know that I know nothing. I just know what I know today. All I'm saying is where the core of the foundation of the security of their business was the fact that people like me and the people I used to teach the equipment would put up with their mistakes in their hardware because of the loyalty to it.
Yes.
Okay, and they put up with some of the really bad times at Apple because they were professional people, and they made their decisions based on different choices. People today on a consumer level make their choices on what's fashionable. Nobody in a graphic design company bought their Mac because it was fashionable. It was the right computer for the job.
Yes and no. And you are absolutely right about that.
It was the right computer for the job.
But you let people know that not specifically you, but a lot of those people that worked in ad agencies and had Macs, you got that little sticker and you put that on your car or you put that on your skateboard. No, they did that. I know you don't think they did that. They did that.
Of course they did. You see it.
Okay, and as soon as they brought out,
I don't think you see too many people who put their PC sticker on their car.
when they brought out the iPod, and everything, and
that's
when
it started to change.
Okay, and you got a sticker with the iPod. All the cool kids were pulling their stickers off their skateboards now and off their cars because it's gone mainstream and it's not cool anymore.
Well, now, I mean, I remember when I was doing the Adobe 8-year period when I was working as a consultant with Adobe, and I would be the only person in the airport with a Mac laptop.
Yeah.
And I used to purposely, even though you didn't need to, because it goes to sleep when you close it, okay? So then it doesn't make a noise when you open it up, it just turns on.
Yeah.
So I would purposely turn it off when I knew that I was going to turn it on in the lounge, because it would be full of business people on their PCs. And I wanted to be that one person that just opened up this shiny, lovely Mac laptop, and when it goes...
That is the antithesis of who you are now.
And then everybody would then go... And the amount of people that would get up and come and sit down next to me and talk to me about the laptop that I was using, and I literally would be the only person.
If I hadn't known you for the last 6 months, I wouldn't believe this story, because it's the antithesis of who you are now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you wonder why I have this slight little kind of apprehension about what I'm doing next week. No, but the thing is, there's nothing wrong with recognizing that there were, let's say, flaws in our outlooks, in our previous selves. You know, we're not one entity from the moment we leave school, and we don't stay the same. And
we're always changing.
We need to change, and you need to be able to look back and go, oh my God, what?
Yeah.
And now, look, I mean, I go to this cafe, and I make a note. A little mental note from time to time when it's really full, loads of students doing their work, 5% non-Mac. Yeah. Everything is Mac now. My problem with it is when you hang the future on your business on the sector of the market which are fickle and susceptible to the new in thing, that's a risky thing to do. I understand why they needed to move into that sector, because they always needed to. Everybody who ever said, oh, PCs are so much better than Macs, they were talking usually from ignorance because they'd never used a Mac before. There's, out of all the people I've ever met who went from PC to Mac, only a tiny percentage went back to PC again. I'm not saying that they didn't, because there's no prerequisite that says you have to like the alternative. But to say that something's crap on the basis you've never touched it or used it before is just stupidity.
And I get asked the question, how does the Z series compare?
What is the Z series? It's the camera that we were going to talk about.
How does it compare to the Sony? And I'm like, I've never used the Sony, so I can't compare. I will not say anything negative about the Sony, because I've never picked it up. I've never looked through it. I've never, So when I started using this, I was involved a little bit in the I don't want to say research and development, because that makes it sound like I know something about how they make cameras. But I tested I did some testing for them, and That was the first time I've looked through an electronic viewfinder in terms of the mirrorless.
How do you find that?
Well, it takes a little bit of getting used to. Because you also have different options. You can see what your exposure is going to be like,
Yep.
or you can just switch it to, you know, the
Yep.
usual thing. And for me, it was like, hold on, this looks different. But after 5-10 minutes, it's as if you. It's
I still find it really difficult to see a
I haven't looked.
pixelated view.
I
of what I'm
can't
gonna see.
compare it to anything else. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So what I've experienced was cool.
You see, this is where I would play my argument, because the thing is, you could get a devout Sony user here and a Nikon ambassador here, and talking about the pros and cons of the mirrorless Nikon versus the mirrorless thing. What I would look at is from the customer's perspective. You see, you're valid because you're a pro, you're in your industry, and it's your chosen field, and so your perspective, because you're within the field, is a little bit polarized in a sense, because it must be quite hard maybe for you to look at your work from your customer's point of view. And so I'm your customer because I see your images in Photoshop. So the camera and its hardware and the software and what the screen looks like and everything else has got nothing to do with it. It's irrelevant. My point would be is if I had Mr. Nikon sat next to Mr. Sony with a similar price bracket pro camera with a similar lens, and you both took a shot and we put both of them up, no one would be able to with assurance 100% say, oh, and there's mine. No one would be able to know.
Unless you've if you're shooting in RAW and you've got both RAW files. If you're shooting with the effects that are in camera, you know, you're shooting a JPEG and they've got vivid and portrait mode and...
Yeah, just out of the box, so it's just on factory defaults, no effects, okay? So it's just taking a shot. No one, there's not a human alive that would be able to bet their first child's life on the fact that that came from, and that was the lens that was used. I'm not trying to belittle it. All I'm trying to do is put into proportion the importance of hardware. And for me, especially in the because all I care, and the reason I do this is to discuss creativity.
Okay, but you've also got to look at other things. Forget about the pixels. You've got to, and I'm not here to sell you the camera. You have to also understand that.
Okay.
Okay, but you've got to look at things like the weather sealing.
Of course.
If you go out and shoot in the rain and you shoot in a camera it's like wearing a watch that's waterproof and the other one isn't waterproof. It's that kind of thing as well.
There are all these other aspects to the technology, but the vast majority of people that I mingle with at shows or end up talking with via Skype or through the membership and stuff, not in the membership because they know what I'm like when it comes to this stuff, I guess, already. They know my view. But they argue until they're blue in the face that their camera is better than this camera.
I'm not here to do that.
When, from my point of view, when I even though I manipulate images and I teach manipulation of images, images that make me want to buy them when I go into a gallery, I don't ask what brush was used to put the paint on the canvas. I don't say, and what canvas is that, and what wood is used for the frame. How old was the art?
It's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant. It's the emotional connection to the creativity that I care about in everything.
Yeah, but you're the end user, but I have to look at it. I have to look at it, say, from a business perspective. Yeah. If I buy this piece of equipment, how long is it going to last? Will I be able to? If I'm a photojournalist,
build quality.
Yeah, there's things like that.
Because I hear quite a lot from people. I'm not going to mention because it's not my place to badmouth or use conversations that I've had in the past to degrade or is it degrade?
Diminish.
To diminish somebody's brand at all, because degrade. Because there's always a rogue piece of tech that comes off the production line that's just going to fall apart. But I hear sometimes people talking about once you've used a camera for a while, the black grippy sticky stuff starts to peel off. See, that would bother me.
Okay, but I lived in Durban and that was because of the humidity. That's what it
They
is.
fall apart because of the atmospheric
Yeah,
conditions.
in Johannesburg, you don't really have that problem.
Right.
So it's about the humidity and the glue that they use. But that's not only with one brand of camera.
No, that'd be
Across the board.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same as when you go and you get a photograph printed and you leave it in the sunlight. You know, it's going to deteriorate.
Yeah.
So the black rubbers, they especially under humid conditions. So if you looked after your gear and instead of keeping them in a dark, wet cupboard, you know, put them into a safe with
hermetically sealed,
that kind of
controlled
thing.
atmospherics.
Or you just send it back and they reapply the rubbers. Happy days.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to get onto this mirrorless scenario. Okay, so as the host of this, I feel the need we should just talk about it specifically. So what I see is a shift in technology.
Mm-hmm.
My first hearing of the word mirrorless was, I guess, 2 years ago, and it centered around Fuji cameras. I think they were, I don't know, but I think they were the first mainstream brand who went down the mirrorless thing.
Yeah.
I see through the behavior of photographers that I know who were just intrigued and bought it as their holiday cameras. They didn't have to lug around these great big Canons. I don't mean the brand, but these huge things. You know, they're ergonomic, they're good quality, and it was new. It was something new. It was a new piece of tech. And then over a couple of years, I've just seen this massive swing, and it's not that I do it, I just witness it, where Fuji have stolen the march. The market, like, proportion of sales in the market they have, I think far surpasses probably what they even suspected they would get. And so my question would be, one question, and it's not necessarily to you because it's certainly to people who are watching as well, is would Nikon be making and Canon be making mirrorless cameras if Fuji hadn't brought one out 2 years ago?
I don't think that.
Or is it a knee-jerk reaction?
Well, it could be a knee-jerk reaction by all the brands because it's kind of like the situation where you don't know how much you need it until someone tells you.
Okay, maybe a different way of approaching it is, what is the one major benefit of having a mirrorless camera over a mirrored camera?
What the manufacturers would tell you would be the fact that it's light, the body is lighter.
Okay.
However, that's a bit of a misdemeanor, not misdemeanor, misnomer. What? Mister? It's
bullshit.
Because the lenses are generally heavier. So you put the two and two together and it weighs the same.
Because they've just moved the technology into the lens.
Yeah.
Rather than it being in the camera back.
Yeah. Okay. So you can shoot in silent mode in terms of absolute pure silence, which does have its pros and cons, because if you're a wedding photographer and you're shooting in a church, you're stealth. You know, you're a
ninja.
Yeah, you're a Navy SEAL ninja. All right. However, work with me here.
What?
You can't hear when I'm shooting.
Oh, right.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm busy shooting, and I'm not sending any audio signals to my model. Because what would happen is if you're shooting with flash, your flash would fire and the model knows, okay, next pose. So if you're shooting catalog work, then obviously, or fashion work, then that click is almost an acknowledgement of good, you know, so you don't have...
They're priming themselves, getting ready for the
just
the
move
expression. And that's like a metronome for a musician in a way.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
So I'm giving you the pros and cons here, not just the pros.
Absolutely.
So what I experienced when I was photographing, doing the test run up with the model, if she was doing something like dancing, and I'm photographing her dancing, she's doing her own thing. She's into her, you know, there's no interaction with me. I'm observing and I'm shooting photojournalistically. No problem whatsoever. When we started to shoot posing and eye contact and give me something with your eyes, she was like, when are you going to take the shot?
Yeah,
I'm like, well, I've taken 15.
Yeah, but you can choose to make it make a noise.
You can choose to, yeah, but that's so like...
but you see, those to me aren't justifications for a massive organisation to be making one particular kind of style of camera for forever in digital, and then suddenly turn in another direction and now go mirrorless. That's not justification for the enormous amount of R&D. And
they must have. Well, don't you think it's also looking at an emerging market or a different market to pros? Because obviously your pros are at a level where they are buying equipment that is obviously relevant to their industry, and there could be a massive market where you've got hobbyists wanting to become professionals, and then there is a place absolutely for mirrorless technology in the professional market. But when we say professional market, what are you really saying? Are you saying somebody who makes a living out of photography? And if you are making a living out of photography, which market are you actually servicing? So if you're photographing families, you're a professional photographer, but you're not a commercial photographer.
No, they're two entirely different beasts.
Okay, so for me personally, and this is my opinion, for me personally, if I was shooting a major campaign, and I do understand that Mario Testino and Patrick de Marchelier, if they come with little hipster stuff, it's because of the image and the whole, you know, I can, you know, bring out a whatever camera brand and look like I'm cool. But if I'm shooting for a billboard for a certain company and, you know, they employing me and then they're paying me a lot of money, they're paying for models and all sorts of big budget productions. For me personally, I want my D5 there or my D850 because it looks so much more.
It's a part of the part. It's a part of the package.
Yeah, and although they could produce the same image.
Well, fundamentally they do.
Yeah.
Don't they?
Yeah.
Because really the insides, it's only the shutter that has changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, well,
there either is one or there isn't one.
Yeah. Well, it's a mirror that's disappeared, not the shutter, mirror, but that's cool.
Okay, that's cool. The mirror, yeah.
Yeah.
But so, moving the tech into the lenses, doesn't that make the lenses then, all of your lenses more expensive?
Well, they've got an adapter. You can use all the lenses that you've ever had.
Okay.
But the newer lenses that are built for the new mount, so the older mount was that big. Now the newer mount is like that big. So they're bringing out a lens which is like, instead of like f2.0 or f1.2, it's f0.95.
What?
Yeah, it's the 58 mil 0.95. So it's massive. Okay. There's also little things that to me are cute, but not a game changer. Like the bokeh in the background. If you look at bokeh, it's a little bit oval. Now it's round.
Okay.
To me, that's not a game changer. Okay, it's
a quirk.
Yeah. But the newer lenses, the focusing mechanism and all that kind of thing are way smoother for video. So that's where the difference would come in. If you had to ask me now, you're going to do a commercial shoot for Puma and you're doing a billboard, I would shoot that, right now, I would shoot that on my D850.
Yeah.
Because I want the client to see that I've got a significant piece of gear. And that's really about the play, the theatrics of it.
It's a big part of life.
Yeah, okay, how big it is. But if I was going to shoot a video, then I would probably go for the mirrorless, because I think that the video with the mirrorless lenses is better than the DSLR with the old school lenses.
Okay. Okay.
But this is all about what I do, right?
Well, look,
this is my business.
Perception, you know, the perception that you create of yourself in the eyes of your customers is actually a huge thing psychologically. I like to always play devil's advocate in that, though. I like to, because it is a huge thing. Because we all have seen and met people who actually are nowhere near what they think they are, but they're infinitely more successful than their constituent parts because they behave the right way. Okay, they look the part, they turn up in the right car, they speak in the right way, they give the illusion of success. I learned that a long time ago with one company I work for. I won't say who it is, but I learned that the power of suggestion, that, like your business card, how you present your business to people. Because the amount of people that when I told my ex-colleagues that I'd got this job at this company, they went, "Holy shit! How did you get that job?" It was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
These people were at the cutting edge of PostScript systems. How did you get that job? And then I'd been there for a few months, and then they came to the company, and because I'd go downstairs to meet them and then take them upstairs in the lift, and they would be all kind of like nervous. These are people who work with multinational companies, and they were coming into this company, and then they'd come upstairs, and then you would see the reverence just evaporate, and then the disappointment would take over, because the reality didn't meet the image that this guy managed to put out into the industry. He was seen as being just like the all-seeing and knowing person, and the company had such reverence in the industry, yet the reality was it was nothing like it at all. I
went to do a talk at New Scotland Yard, and having been a forensic photographer for as long as I was, if you look at news broadcasts on Sky News and BBC and you see the reporter standing there next to Scotland Yard, the thing turning around, you would think Scotland Yard is like, to get, like, if you go into the police station and you walk around like behind where the public is allowed, like if your perception would be this place is like the holy grail of policing. This is like the capital of the, not the capital of the world, but it's one of the major cities. God, was I disappointed. It was one of the biggest letdowns ever. Like walls not painted.
Of course.
Files lying all over the place. It was a shambles. I thought South Africa was bad. And really that was my personal experience, and I was like so disappointed because you have this preconceived idea.
This is what I like to try and analyze and try and work out the significance of preconceived idea and perception versus reality. So in that, you see that blue camera bag down there?
Yeah, the lunchbox.
Well, 10 years ago, Hasselblad gave me a H3.
Oh yes.
That's a H3 in there. So you imagine what that was when it came out.
Oh yeah.
That was state of the art.
Yeah.
Okay, that was NASA shit.
And they just gave it to you?
Yeah.
Isn't that like?
That was back then. It was the price of a Porsche.
Yeah.
It was a lot of money.
Something like £50,000 or something ridiculous.
No, I think the camera. I'm not 100% sure, but I think what they gave me there was about £25,000. It was a demo.
How much could you get for it now?
You couldn't give it away today, I don't think. If I threw in my D100, you'd get something. But basically, there was a job. I couldn't wait to use it, but I wanted to test the psychology of it all. And so there was a job that I was involved in. I wasn't the photographer, but I was brought in to take some. I was included in this job. And I walked in, and while the client was there and the designer and the art editor and everybody was there, I pulled out that, and instantly reverence.
Yeah.
Instantly. Yeah. They didn't know me from Adam. They're not from my circles.
Mate, that happens, and
And I just pulled out that camera, and then I put it on the table. And then they came around and looked at it, and I said, "Look, you can hold it. It's okay. You can touch. It's made of metal. You don't have to be scared of it." So they all looking. Oh my God! And it was just, how much is that? Oh my God! It's amazing. And in my bag,
Careful with the American accent.
I had my 40D. I had my 40D.
And you were shooting with that?
And when they left the room and I shot the job, I shot on the 40D.
Yeah.
And then we did the job, I did the retouching, we did the proofs, and then all of them, bar none, held up the proof and went, oh my God, that camera's amazing, isn't it?
But isn't that like blind tasting with wine? Stuff like that? It's the same thing.
Yeah, but it's the human condition. There's nothing wrong with it.
And happens.
It's just recognizing.
Yeah, but it happens so much in photography as well.
I've never seen it anywhere more prevalent in any walk of life I've ever been in than in the world of photography.
So in South Africa, in Cape Town, they have like season where from October to March, April, all the big international companies go there to shoot all their campaigns. And now.
Well, it is beautiful there.
It is gorgeous, yes. That's not the point. The point is that you could, as a photographer, and there are a few South African photographers that are very successful when it comes to this, but a lot of the times, local people will lose out jobs because, we're bringing in a German photographer.
I do find this a little bit funny sometimes.
And you go, okay. Or a Brazilian model.
Mm.
And I mean, we've got some gorgeous women in South Africa, and we're using a Brazilian model. It's like, what is that? I mean, that's like Italian shoes, right? And Dutch cheese. So that perception, it can work for people as well, because you can make it work for you too. For example, me as a wedding photographer, my business is based on being a destination wedding photographer.
Mm.
Okay, so. By me living in Amsterdam, my target market isn't Dutch.
Of course.
Okay, and that's intentional.
Yeah.
Okay, because
it's exactly what I would do.
Because I target people who, and if my clients hear this will be terrible. But I target people.
Whisper.
Whisper. Yeah, I heard you whispering the other day. That was like so funny. That was ridiculous. I photograph people's weddings, and a lot of the time, not all the time, because sometimes I have some really cool, that validates everything. Sometimes I have some fantastic clients, and then sometimes I've got clients where I've heard people, I've overheard people where they say, we flew this guy in.
Of course.
It's like, does that mean anything? Does that mean I know how to take a picture? That means nothing, but it adds to the
ingratiate.
It's ingratiating.
It's a great word. That's the word for today.
Word of the day: ingratiate.
Yeah, it just.
But
look at me. Look what I can do. So there's no doubt that now that all the big manufacturers have put their hat in the ring and gone, now we're playing in this market. That it seemed to me, and only from a Luddite point of view, because I just watch what happens.
Yeah, and obviously it's all happened at the same time.
Because Fuji started it a long time ago,
now
right?
The new Nikon's
now everybody's in.
Yeah, now everybody's in. Yeah, within a short. If you say okay, Fuji, but how long ago was that? You said you only heard about 2 years.
Yeah, but
Fuji's been around. Yeah, but they've been around longer than that.
No, Fuji, you've been selling cameras for a long time. But let's ask people who would know. When did Fuji bring out their first
mirrorless
XT series? Isn't it the mirrorless? X series or whatever it was.
Yeah.
When was it? I think it was probably 3 years ago now, maybe even 4 years ago.
Okay, but if you look at how long the planet's been around.
But now I'm seeing. You look at how long digital SLRs have been around. Let's say somewhere
2002.
15 years or something. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it stayed the same for a really long time, and all they did was chuck more pixels in cameras, which I have a lot to say about.
Okay.
But only in the last tiny portion of that, someone decided to do something different.
Yes.
And all the big
disrupt the market.
I would say the people who sold the most amount of cameras into this, they don't want to shake that.
No.
They don't want to
because everything was going fine.
They're making a lot of money out of that.
Yeah.
Whereas when photographers bought film-based cameras, how often would you have to replace the camera because it wore out?
Well, after I could have that F4 for 20 years. I mean, it's still working today. So
they didn't wear out. So it's a real problem for somebody who wants to keep selling you shit, right?
Yeah.
So you look at digital cameras. How often do people buy a new digital camera when they don't actually have to?
Yeah, every 4 years maybe.
Yeah, and some people
even
less
more
than that.
Yeah.
So no one wants to upset that situation when you are the biggest beneficiary of that. And then the way I saw it was in the early days of the SLR, digital SLR revolution, Fuji were a big player because they had the S series, which pretty much was a Nikon camera, but it had Fuji's insides, let's say, its algorithms. And then Fuji fell away. After about 5-6 years, they fell away. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 S range, and then they did that multiple pixel thing, trying to make a HDR camera where they had they had two sensors for every sensor. They had a highlight sensor and then the normal sensor, and then they spliced it together, and it made like a 1% difference to the image. It wasn't nothing that.
It wasn't worth it.
But I took my hat off to them because at least they were trying to do something different rather than just chucking more pixels on a sensor. And then they disappeared for a long time, and then they just sold, you know, hipster cameras, you know, holiday cameras, consumer cameras, and then they come back. And then when they come back, I think if you sat on the board of Canon and Nikon, and you know, and you've had it your own way for at least 10 years, pretty much, then suddenly Fuji are not only these little people on the horizon, they're
big players,
huge now, and so. I just question. I wonder what it was like in the board meeting. So what do we do about this? Because that would be the question. You'd be looking at the market share.
Don't you also think that because of the demise of the compact camera, this is replacing that? And I'm not saying that you cannot use it as a professional. I'm just saying that there was a power vacuum.
I'm watching now people who bought the Fuji as just something to play with and something to enjoy taking snaps instead of being a professional or go on holiday. They're now using that camera as their professional camera because they don't have to lug this big heavy shit around.
And it's good enough to be a professional camera.
And it is more than good enough to be a professional camera. So the rock solid arguments where the technology, there would be a big differential between the lowest brand, say like in the Nikon, and the highest of the SLR, they would have been a big difference before. There's a much smaller difference now between the bottom range to the top. It's closer. And you also, again, I reiterate, you can't tell which camera an image came from when you look at it, when it's on the wall or when it's on the website. So what I imagine is 3 years ago, when you start seeing your market changing, when you're Nikon or Canon, and then you're in a boardroom, and then you're sitting there going, "So what's the future going to be like for us? What do we have to do?" See it, they have to join the race. They have to join the race,
but they also look at it as going, "We lost so much money in the compact division because the compact market is non-existent anymore."
Well, phones killed that, didn't they?
So they have to replace that somehow. And I think that this is a good opportunity for most brands to fill the vacuum that was left by the demise of the compact camera. And coincidentally, the replacement is good enough to be used as a professional camera.
And it's only...
I think we've stumbled on something.
It's only the real niche. Like if you're an event photographer, when you're in a dark room and you need very low light level photography, then you really have to go for this particular camera in this particular segment.
Or a sports photographer. You know, although the Z6 can shoot at 12 frames a second, you know, you're going to be able to shoot in fantastic low light conditions. 12 frames a second with the D5, and you're going. I don't think you're going to see sports photographers on the side. You know, if you say that Fuji and Sony disrupted the market, they disrupted the market in a certain segment.
Exactly, it's not the whole thing.
It's not the whole thing. So you don't see all those sports photographers having gone mirrorless. And I would have thought that if you've got like a tennis match or something, being quiet would be probably more important than, you know, but they don't care.
Okay, then, so let's forget about today. We know where it is today. People are bringing stuff out, and you read all sorts of things and opinions. You brought up one thing about the compact flash, the
I didn't bring it up.
No, the memory slot. There's
the elephant in the room.
And all that kind of stuff. The elephant, and all that kind of stuff. I just see that as what? Out of the 15 years digital cameras have been around, how long have the cameras had 2 slots?
The D3 or the D3S.
And just because the camera's got it, how many people actually used it? Out of all the people who bought that camera, how many people actually really use 2 slots?
Okay, this only happened to me.
Many people who say, yeah, I've got 2 slots, but I only ever use one.
All right. So this happened to me once, and it was the first time I had got the camera with 2 slots. I had been using the D2X, and then I moved on to the D3, and I think the D3 was the first time they had 2 slots. I might be wrong. It might have been the D3S, might be in the D4, but I think it was the D3, and it had 2 slots. And I was shooting like overflow, so you shoot on the one card, because at the time you could only get 16 gig cards or 32 gig cards or whatever. So it was those 2 slots were rarely used, so that you didn't have to change memory cards. You could shoot with 2 16 gig slots, 2 16 gig cards, and move over. So I never shot backup from the 2. I always used it as overflow.
Yeah.
So when I first got it, I put my 2 cards in, and I'm shooting this campaign for Wonderbra, and we moved locations, and we had left the studio to go to the location to do some lifestyle images. And I had downloaded the one card at the studio, and I could format that card, and I put it into the slot. So I had one card over here and the other card in this slot over here. And I'm just about to start the lifestyle shoot, and I press play, and I see an image, and I'm like, but I'm supposed to format this card. So I formatted it, and I press play again, and I still saw the image. So I formatted it again, and I saw the image again, and I'm like, okay. So then I just started shooting. When you're formatting, I was looking at the images on this card, but formatting this card, and pretty much lost 3 garments that I'd previously shot. So my experience with 2 slots has only ever once been negative.
A negative thing.
It's never been, I've always used it as overflow. Always, always, always.
But there is the option to use it as a backup, so it makes
You can do whatever you like. You can do RAW on the one, JPEG on the other, RAW and RAW, JPEG. You can do whatever you like. But I had to then tell the agency 2 days later, there's 3 garments we haven't shot. And that means flying the model back, getting hair and makeup, stylist. Because if you're shooting 3 garments or 150, your cost is still the same in terms of how much. So I had to pay for the model to come back. I had to pay I had to pay. So basically,
you never made that mistake again.
No. so from my experience, that 2 card slot didn't start off very well. But it only ever happened once, as you say. You know, and I'm sure lots of people have got many stories about how how having 2 cards saved them. I just think, from my perspective, if you treat your memory cards with respect, very little chance you're going to have something go wrong with them, especially the XQD cards. And don't treat them like thumb drives. Don't treat them like just throw everything onto them, take them out and use them as thumb drives and put rubbish onto them, because they're not designed for that. They're designed as cards for cameras. They're not designed as external hard drives. Although being
used as that.
being 256 gigs, you can think, well, I can use this as an external hard drive. So I mean, you can talk until you're blue in the face with that, but I started off shooting film. You'd go to a wedding and you'd shoot 20 rolls of film, and when you're at the reception, you take them out your bag and you count them and you make sure, I've got 4 rolls of color, 5 rolls of black and white. Where did this go? Where did that go? I'm missing a roll of film. What now? Go down to the car, look in the scratch in the boot. Once I found 1 roll of film on the floor outside the boot. I mean, people have got lots of stories like that. I'm not saying that that's unique, but I would rather, I personally don't find an issue with 1 memory card slot.
No, me too. So, okay, then I think it's clear, at least for the foreseeable future, this change in structure of technology or branch of technology is here to stay. But would you see that in, say, 10 years' time or in 5 years' time,
something else
there
coming
will be a massive decline in conventional SLRs, and mirrorless will take over. Because this is only, you know, dipping your foot in the market, right? It's your first, from the manufacturer's point of view. And it's just like my argument, in my world, my argument is Lightroom and Photoshop, okay? So the biggest problem if you're Adobe is, I'm sure you could put a whole bunch of Photoshop stuff inside Lightroom, but then people wouldn't need Photoshop. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be very careful about how you enhance and how you let things evolve, that you don't kill one of your own markets.
Cannibalize,
so,
yeah.
From Nikon's point of view, obviously they have a great business selling high-end or, you know, just SLRs from a great range. But they've got a really good brand in
identity,
high quality
yeah.
selling cameras. You're forced, whether you want to or not, to enter the race for mirrorless, because you can't be the person that says, no, we're not doing that, so they have to do it.
Well, Steve Jobs said he's not going to put flash onto his,
yeah,
you know, and I'm not putting a DVD drive, and I'm not putting a USB port.
Yeah, well, when it came to flash, he only said that because he was right. I mean, he was right. Flash was never invented as a medium to transport video. It was a medium to create animation.
But I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
And so from their point of view, for the first couple of versions, they're going to have to be quite tentative, not to rock the boat of a very good business model that makes a lot of money selling high-end mirrored SLRs. But is the difference in technology going to be something that is going to stay and not be a fad, that then when we look back, when hopefully we know each other in 10 years' time, and we do another version of this.
Absolutely.
Let's hope we're doing something different by then. And then we go, yeah, do you remember mirrored cameras? A mirrored camera is just going to, at some point in time, end because of mirrorless.
If I had to put money on it, I would say in 10 years' time there will still be SLRs. It might be more targeted at a specific genre of photographer, so it could become more specialized.
Yeah.
Let's say it's the same as medium format. It becomes the medium format what medium format is now. And the evolution, when we were shooting 8x12s, and then we were shooting 6x7s, and then you're shooting 6.6 on the Hasselblad, people were still using 35 mils, and then it was very specialized, that the medium format market then. Okay. And now you've got a situation where maybe in 10 years' time the SLR will be the medium format of what medium format is today.
Okay.
Maybe.
Right. Look at the question or look at the situation from a different viewpoint. What's the benefit of SLR over mirrorless? What is the benefit of SLR? I'm
looking through an optical viewfinder, so I'm seeing something real and not tangible, but something real through the optical viewfinder. This is more of an emotive answer. When I pick up that D5, I know I'm going to take a good picture, because it just feels like I'm dealing with a beast. It really feels like, now I feel like a photographer. Because you have to understand that I wasn't born a photographer.
You learned to be one.
Yeah, I learned how to be one. So I've got to switch on that role. Okay, so now
your kit is a part of that, your identity.
Yeah, it's me getting in the zone. It really is. I mean, I pick it up and now I know I feel like a photographer.
So from the ergonomics of it and the emotional relationship to the kit, it's a slight step back to hold a mirrorless.
A lot of people, when they're shooting mirrorless, they shoot like this.
Yeah.
Okay, and for me, I can't relate to that.
Yeah.
So for me, if I'm ever going to shoot mirrorless, it's going to be like this.
Yeah.
Unless, you know, like journalists call, you're going to sit there and you're going to interview someone and have a chat with them, because now there's this. If I interviewed you like this,
no, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So I can interview you, like I can flip the screen out and interview you like that. Happy days. It's not what I do. So for me, I'm not going to switch to mirrorless in the foreseeable future. If I incorporated video into my business, which I am doing a little bit more, the video capabilities are very exciting for me. But that would mean in my business, I wouldn't go for the Z7, I would go for the Z6 because it's cheaper. And from the video perspective, I'm not going to be using it. If I was just entering the market and I needed 45 million pixels, then I'd buy the Z7. But for video purposes, if I'm only going to use it for vlogging or creating behind-the-scenes videos, I don't need the Z7. I would rather use the Z6. But that's what's cool about this whole thing. Now we've got choices. What do you do for a living?
Have more choice.
What do you do for a living? I shoot this. Okay, well, here there is something for you.
Okay, so another question that has entered my mind, and I found myself saying this to a whole bunch of people, and I don't know, and that's why I have to ask a bunch of people. Let's ask the people who are here. As a percentage, and it's not about what you specifically do, okay, or what you do, but if you had to guess as a percentage of how many professionally taken images, whether it's in social photography or commercial photography, that don't go anywhere near a printing press or any print process and that only ever used in a digital medium, what percentage would go into a printed product? Because it's decreasing, right? There's no doubt it's decreasing.
There is a bit of a backlash, a little bit.
Okay.
People are going back to printed stuff because it's.
Who is?
The general population is. They're printing images from their phones. It's becoming a lot.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking professionally. I'm talking about
professionally.
Images.
Okay. So I know what you mean.
So there's a degradation or a reduction in number of, say, of couples who get married who now order albums, right?
No. Yes and no, because
less albums are made now from images that are taken at weddings.
No, it's starting to come back.
No, because there's still less.
Yes,
what then? To be, because it used to be the only way that you would get your images.
When? Are you talking about when film was being shot, or
even at the beginning of digital?
At the beginning of digital, there weren't as many photographers around as there are now. And in the beginning of digital, the photographers that were shooting digital, most of them came from film. So they were still doing it the old school way.
The product that they sold, they didn't see the product as being an image. They saw the product. They saw the images as being this thing that became an album, that they sold an album to a company. The couple.
No, in the beginning, we treated digital files as if they were negatives, because we were conditioned to treat digital files. We were conditioned in your business to run your business like a business, and if you give your digital files away, you're never going to make money long term and have a sustainable, profitable business. If you look at the way when we were shooting film, we had archives, we'd file the negatives, and there you go. 90% of the photographers that switched from film to digital carried on their business like that.
In the same way.
In the same way. They printed the pictures, they put them into albums, and they gave them to the clients.
Exactly.
The newer generation that entered the market only shooting digital, they started giving away digital files.
Exactly.
Okay, and that resulted in the printing deteriorating. Now that those photographers have been around and are trying to make it as professionals, they are starting to realize that you can't
make money from doing a wedding for 50 quid and here's the disc.
Yes. Okay. And
can't do that.
There will always be the people that feel like that, and they will enter the market, realize that they can't do this, and they're sacrificing way too much for that, and they will leave the market. But there's still people coming. So there'll always be.
There's a trend where customers the people who are getting married are now asking for albums more.
No, photographers are persuading them to go for albums more.
Right. Okay.
So photographers who are more serious about this,
Okay.
not photographers who have just entered the market, think they can make a quick buck and then disappear. And I don't have an issue with those people because they don't affect me whatsoever.
Absolutely.
So it's the same thing as when Jamie Oliver burst onto the scene and started to teach everyone how to cook. You would think that suddenly people are not going to restaurants anymore. They're all becoming chefs. And you would think that that whole industry would be deteriorating and suddenly now everybody can be a chef. You just watch 24 Kitchen and everyone can be a chef. But the experience of going to a proper fine dining restaurant, or not fine dining, but
just a good restaurant.
Yeah. So if you go to a photographer that provides you with a great experience, a great product, you'll always have what I call the hot dog market and the fine dining market. And anyone can make a hot dog. Not everyone can provide fine dining. But the people that are trying to sell hot dogs, and please just bear with me.
I'm sticking with it.
The people that are trying to sell hot dogs are realizing that you can't just sell 3 hot dogs on a Saturday, because it doesn't work like that anymore. You used to be able to have a very high volume business with low margin, shooting 60, 70 weddings a year, charging less, and essentially that doesn't happen anymore. You don't have photographers that are shooting. We're shooting less. Personally, I'm shooting way less weddings than I used to, but I'm making more money.
Yeah, but you're only talking about weddings, and I'm not really talking. Weddings are just a tiny part of it.
Yeah.
I'm talking commercial graphic design projects, commercial work.
Well, that's also about
where the image never
gets printed,
goes,
but even
near a printing
even
press.
Major,
it's only ever used for
Instagram.
Online, well, no, it's used for
websites, Facebook,
movie, whatever, where only in a sense, comparable low resolution images are required, which is contrary to where SLRs are going, where they're just getting more and more and more and more and more pixels.
Don't you think that they,
at the same time, when the requirement for more pixels is less and less and less, because we are now publishing digitally.
Okay, but the appeal of more and more pixels is not what you think it is. You think, because you expect everybody to behave themselves and shoot properly, you think that the attraction of more pixels to photographers is to have a bigger file so that they can print in a better way. It's not. A lot of photographers want a big file so that they can crop, which means that they shoot worse. You don't need more than 6 megapixels.
Absolutely.
If you shoot properly, and I'm not saying that I'm the guru of how to shoot properly, but because I grew up shooting film, I hardly crop my images. I mean, the only time that I crop is when I'm shooting sport, and you've got stuff that's happening in front of you that you can't control.
Yeah.
You know, so you leave a little bit of space in case suddenly he goes like that.
Why don't you do that anyway?
Why don't I do what anyway?
Leave a bit of space.
Because I shoot it properly. Because I don't want to.
But when you're a commercial photographer, because this is going to be interesting, okay?
Yeah.
When you're a commercial photographer, you're not the graphic designer who is going to place that picture in the hole.
Yeah, but you've got the art director there who's giving you a.
But even at that time, they don't have the page design in front of them, and so to give just an extra 20% as you have the pixels,
20% is fine.
Give yourself a bit of extra room, because the true cropping of an image happens in the graphic design process, not in the photography process.
Yeah.
See what I mean? And then,
no, I see exactly what you mean.
Just finish this point. The amount of times when I worked in publishing, when I was given a transparency and then I can see where that's got to go, and I just put my head in my hands and I go,
not enough space.
How am I going to make this work?
Yeah.
If only, if only there was just an extra 5% here, I could make that. It makes a difference to that page.
If I'm shooting,
so commercially, shooting for the end game,
yes,
and the end game not being you, is not something I come across very often. The awareness of that. Because what I do come across a lot, and I have done a lot, is the absolute tyrant vice-like grip that a photographer wants to have on their product.
I don't care about that at all. I have no issue with that at all.
I need to have my credit on there, and don't touch my image, and I'm going to manipulate it, when they don't even know how it is going to be used in the context of what the end client wants it to be used for.
But isn't that ego?
That's just insanity to me. And it is the world upside down.
But for me, how can I possibly fathom that I am better at post-production than you are?
Huh?
How could I ever possibly fathom that I am better at post-production than what you are?
I don't know where you're going with this.
What I'm going is that my job is to shoot the image.
Yeah.
Your job is to do the retouching.
Yeah.
The other person's job is to do the layout. The other person's job is to do the styling.
Exactly.
So collectively we produce the end result. If I come with my ego...
But what you can do, because you're at the beginning, kind of has a concertina effect as it goes down, which can have quite... It quite often would have quite negative context in the design stage when I'm trying to put pictures in holes which just don't fit.
Yeah, but
have been, especially from a digital point of view, have been characterized so distorted from reality in the retouching process that doesn't fit the context in which the image wants to be used. And then the tirade of abuse that you would get when you call the photographer and say, look, we've got your file, but could we just have the raw file, please?
Yeah.
Because how we want to use that image, the one you've given us, just doesn't work.
Okay, but you go back to shooting slides. When we shot slides, I gave you the raw file. I gave you the slide. Have we started something here?
Yeah, no. It's always as soon as I see that flick, I need to have a look at it.
All right.
Look, I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate always, because that's how you get into something. You've got to be slightly provocative, and it doesn't matter where you are in the process. But all I know is when I worked in the print side, where we had transparencies and stuff, and we had to scan them in, we had a little bit more control over that. But the amount of times when the client is saying, right, I want that image in that space, this is what we've got allotted, the text has already been laid out, that's the space we've got, and the picture doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work because the person who took the shot was too specific and wanted to impose what they wanted it to be, rather than what the process is. So understanding that you're a part of a process rather than you are the process.
Yeah. So for me, if I impose my dominance too much, then I have to ultimately take responsibility for anything that could possibly go wrong. So if I can share the responsibility to the team, I'm much happier. I've done my job. You know, I'm happy to hand it over to somebody else, and I make sure that I focus on being the best possible photographer I can be. You focus on being the best possible post-production person you be, and together we make magic.
Yeah, exactly. But absolutely.
And I look at that in terms of my long-term relationship with the client. Because if I impose all my rules and regulations, and you have to have a credit here, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, how many times are you going to work with me? Once.
In the days when I used to commission photographers to come in and shoot for us, I would know
before the first click.
No, I would know in the first conversation.
Okay.
I would know just basically with the tone, and I would know in the very first conversation whether I was going to hire them.
You see, but the landscape has changed so much over the last 10 years that there's so much competition out there. And just as you say that most cameras take an image that you can't distinguish, you could be in a situation that if you're looking at a specific photographic assignment, you wouldn't know if it was you that shot the shot, or if I shot the shot, or if Annie Leibovitz shot the shot. You know, so that comes down to relationships, and that's for me where I shine with my relationships with my clients. I mean, if I have a commercial client, you know, we're talking about a 10, 12, 15-year relationship. I hardly ever do one job for a client. It's all built on that whole relationship thing, and I think that that's much more important, especially in this day and age where loyalty is diminishing by the minute. But when there's so much competition,
you said that twice now.
Yeah, it is. It's right.
You think it is?
Yeah, of course it is. Also, you have situations. I mean, I don't want to say that we're of a different generation to what is going on in the market now. But let's look at my dad. Okay, my dad worked at the same job for 41 years.
Yeah.
In the same company.
Yeah.
If you work in the same company now for 41 years, you don't have any ambition.
Yeah. Society would make you have those thoughts about yourself.
So you build relationships in companies now, and 3 years' time they're working somewhere else. So it's difficult.
Well, movement of workforce means that companies do have the ability to reorganize and restructure on a regular basis.
But it never used to be as much as it is now.
Yeah, not at all.
It is quite cool though when you built a relationship with somebody, they were working at this specific company and then they go somewhere else and then you end up working for them there as well.
Yeah.
You know, but then you have to start rebuilding relationships with other people here. And for me, I mean, this we can also tie this back to what you do for a living. For me, I outsource all my post-production. I don't do any post-production myself. The reason I do that is so that I can spend my time building relationships with clients.
Yeah.
And I do that I go to lunch with a wedding coordinator from a hotel.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there having lunch and my post-production is being outsourced, and that time is, for me, much more effective. Much better used.
Yeah.
You know, and the developing those relationships, that's key to business success these days. And I think relationships are the differential in terms of the longevity of your career, and also going back to the camera brands, your relationship with that brand. You know, if you have a negative, something goes wrong with the camera, or you want the sensor cleaned, or you just want a checkup or something like that, certain brands have reputations for not being as efficient as other brands. Yeah. But for me, as a Nikon NPS member, you know, for me I know that there's dependability there, there's loyalty, there's almost like a tangible relationship that I have with the brand, you know?
No, I mean, look, brand loyalty is a human condition. It just is. It certainly has been for me forever in all things, like I said before. I mean, from hi-fis to
to
TVs,
sneakers, everything.
You know, you would lean towards playing football, Puma. You know, Puma were my brand, simply because I liked the single white stripe that tailed. It would be my default go-to for a very long time, and then eventually went to Adidas.
Yeah, but Puma suits your personality more.
Why?
Because it's not mainstream. It's a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a little. You know, Adidas is very mainstream. So, but that's a whole nother conversation. You know, but like for example, Nikon. If we go back to brand loyalty and the thing. Nikon do things that I find really interesting and beneficial that I haven't seen other brands do, where they have done one or two things, but Nikon have regular interactions with their consumers. They've got, at the moment they've got. Have you heard of Jimmy Nelson? Quickly have a look. Jimmy Nelson. He's a photographer who shoots a few extraordinary. I mean, he's done some really interesting work.
Is this him?
Yeah.
JimmyNelson.com?
Yeah. So now Nikon has brought him out for the NPS members and also other people at workshops to come and listen to this guy. I mean,
I have seen some of these images before.
Now he's got a talk and an exhibition on Monday that I'm going to.
Right.
If you're keen to come in Amsterdam, you're keen to come along, you can come. I'm sure I can pull a few strings. But to me, this is really interesting stuff because it's very different to what I shoot. I would, when I look at this, I had an idea about, I'm sorry I talk a lot, but I suppose that's what we're here for, right?
That is what we're here
for. Football shoes, all black.
Raymond Copper.
Copper, oh yeah.
Copper, yeah.
About 10 years ago, when I was at, I was shooting 50, 60 weddings a year, and weddings for me were a major part of my life. I wanted to do a book, coffee table book called A World of Weddings, where I traveled the world photographing people like this getting married and shooting, but it had to be authentic. And I tried to do one, and it would be videoed and all that. Do a documentary about. I wanted to shoot a real Catholic wedding in Rome. I wanted to shoot a real Jewish wedding in Israel. I don't want to say Eskimos, Inuits, indigenous folk of the North Pole. I wanted to do a real wedding there, a pygmy wedding, and all of that. But you can get 4 or 5 people like this to do stuff like this, and he has taken a bit of criticism with regards to people saying that he's exploiting these people and all sorts of things. But political conversations can happen from anywhere. But I tried it with a Zulu wedding, with a tribal black Zulu wedding, and I went and shot these people's wedding, and you've got people in Nikes and Levi's and Ray-Bans, and so the authentic tribes where people like this, it's and massive amount of money to fund something like that. But what he's done, I mean, this is fascinating for me because it's so far removed from what I do. Although the techniques are pretty similar. I mean, if I look at the lighting, the lighting, the composition, photography for me, whether this sounds so. Whether I was shooting a dead body when I was a police photographer, or I'm shooting a baby, or if I'm shooting Wonderbra, or if I'm shooting a wedding, it's still photography, and it's about how you interpret what's in front of you. So when I look at this, I think that this is gorgeous and wonderful that he has got a passion to do stuff like this, and
it's cool.
Yeah. So if you're around, drop me a text, and we can.
I'll have to see how the work goes at the weekend.
Oh yes, because you're preparing
on Saturday, and then I've
Sunday.
got some videos to shoot. And
then you're preparing for Photokina.
And then so I've got some videos for my.
Can you please tell the good folk out there what you're doing next week?
Yeah. I'm.
Would you like to hold hands while we?
I'm revisiting. I need to go on a kind of a psychiatric couch at this point, I think.
Just talk to me. What are you doing next week?
Okay, I'm presenting for Wacom at Photokina, and Wacom's quite kind of a difficult thing really to present for 2 hours, because obviously it's a utility. It's a utility device, right? So it's a mouse, it's the equivalent of a mouse. So to talk about the Wacom, I'm not expected to talk about. So I'm just going to be, I'm not going to be talking about the Wacom pen for 2 hours. But basically, in the discussions of me accepting the invite to work for them and on stage for them, and hopefully entertain some people at Photokina, go back to an old haunt that I used to be a regular at, and I started thinking about the presentation, because I've had a really good, healthy break from doing it, because you know what it's like. We talked when we was having a meal today about, there's no denying. I was talking to a really good friend yesterday about auras, okay? The electromagnetic field that every living thing produces. And it's scientifically proven. There are cameras that can be filtered to see your aura. I remember watching this as a teenage child going, what? Because whenever you hear the word aura, it's kind of a bit mysticism, it's a bit woo, and it's a bit kind of black magic and
Unless
stuff.
It's coupled with Rita.
And Now, where was I going with that? I can't.
You're going back to photokina.
Energy, and when you're in front of people,
Yeah.
the size of the audience you're in front of has a profound effect on you as a speaker.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Or a performer. Let's say
Yeah,
performer.
Yeah.
And I remember my first thing with Adobe that just shook me to my core. And I never panic or anything. I didn't panic on that day, but inside I was just so far out of my comfort zone. I had done working with Adobe at really big trade shows, but I was never on stage. That was what other people did, and I was just somebody on what they used to call a workstation. So
domestique.
Somebody one-to-one could come and
Okay.
talk to you about problems they're having with programs, and I was the go-to man for Photoshop and print process related stuff. And then I got on stage, and then they gave me a microphone one day and said, "Yeah, you're going to do a presentation." And it was at the
Was somebody ill or something?
No. The guy just said, "It's time for you to now present on stage." So he didn't tell me anything about the event. And I remember I went down to London, stayed in this hotel, and then I was told that the venue was the BBC Radio Theatre. So it was quite a prestigious thing, and it was the release of Illustrator 8. And I hadn't even seen it before, and they gave me a beta of it and then this PDF of the demonstrations that I had to do that next morning. So I had the whole evening, so I stayed awake all night to learn it, because there's me thinking, Adobe, oh my God, I'm going to be on stage, I've got to wear a microphone. I'd never worn a microphone and stuff before. And it was like 250 people, I think maybe 300 people, and you can only see the first row because it's lit in a particular way and everybody else is black. So. And I just absolutely cacked my pants. I really did, and I really screwed up. And then I thought they'd never use me again. And the guy said, "Well, there you go. There's your cock up. Everybody screws up. Because you have to acclimatise to it." And within a year, it was like you couldn't put me in front of a bigger audience. There was no audience. It was too big. You could put me at Wembley Stadium, and I'd be just my heartbeat wouldn't raise at all.
It's your comfort zone.
And so I just love it. But then I was thinking, I don't want to go back to that. There's no way I can ever go back to that person that I became when I was doing that every day. Because instead of it being the usual speaker thing where you've got your profession and then you speak once a month, I was doing it every day. I was a professional presenter for probably 10 different brands.
And that's the difference between having one beer a week and drinking every single day.
Yeah, and so my drug intake or my cognitive drugs that I was producing, they created a distortion which was... It was just untenable. That life could never continue, and I'm so relieved it came to an end, because I didn't end it. It ended forcibly in a way, and it ended very sharply. But anyway, I had a really long gap. I've done loads of other events, but I haven't done big trade events. So I'm really curious of being at a big noisy trade event again, where that was my home before. It was like I only felt really comfortable when I was in those arenas before, and I haven't done it for a long time. So I was thinking about my presentation and just thinking about how I was going to put it across, and so and also with my new website release that's imminent, you have to have a message, right? And so I guess to identify me, like how do I put myself across to explain thoroughly and succinctly exactly what it is I do, so you're not just seen as another wanger and brush it in there and wang it over there and brush it in there. And so I came up with this thing, Fusion, because I'm old school. All the principles, like when we were sitting here and I was retouching and you was kind of going, oh cool, that's interesting. Everything I was doing has got nothing to do with any particular version of Photoshop. It's a mindset. It's a philosophy that came from the darkroom days, not a photographic darkroom, because that was quite limited in what you could do in a photographic darkroom, but a litho darkroom, which was basically the way to look at it is a photographic darkroom was composite. You as a photographer put composite film, red, green, and blue was built into the film, and you only ever saw it as a single piece of film. The camera didn't take, you didn't have a piece of film that only recorded the red frequency and then the green and the blue, and then you put it together.
It's all in one.
It's all in one. It's composite. So you have a composite negative or positive, and then you transfer it into the opposite on a piece of paper. Where in litho we worked in separated mode, so we never saw composite. We saw, for every image, it was manipulated.
That's why you work like that.
And that's the foundation of why I think and why all my techniques are born from those days. Because the process of the workflow meant that every single thing you did in the darkroom had a cost to the business, because you would go in and use a piece of film. And we're not talking about a pissy little piece of film like this. We're talking about a huge piece of film that could be A2. That unit cost, I think back in the days when I used to do probably 50 of those, I would develop 50 of those a day maybe. They had a unit cost of something like £6 or £7 each.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So if you didn't think through your whole process to try and minimize how many films you used and minimize the amount of fuck-ups you made, then you would be no use to the business. It didn't matter about your talent. If you weren't economical with your time and your consumables, you would be too expensive to keep and you'd lose your job.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm workflow orientated. I think where I'm trying to get to, what I want, and I break up every single part into a creative but mechanical process, so I'm the most efficient with reaching the highest quality that I possibly can, but in the shortest amount of time, with the with the most amount of flexibility. Because one thing customers always do
is change
their mind. So when you workflow yourself down a cul-de-sac, and then you just know, and you would sit there and you go, I really made a mistake there. I should have just gone left when I went right, and then it would be flexible. And if the phone rings 2 hours before the print deadline, before the press starts, and they go, we need to make a change, I'm going to have to do the whole thing again from the beginning.
Because you made one cock-up.
You would learn very quickly. You could strategize your workflow to have breakpoints. So you could say, okay, you don't tell the customer that. You tell the customer you have to go right back to the beginning. But what you do is you only have to go back a third, and then you can.
So that's what you're doing in your.
So non-destructive kind of thing is not something that came from layers in Photoshop. It's a mindset of being just cognitively aware, I think, of the whole picture, not just the thing you've got to do right now to get over the hurdle. And so I came up with this thing, fusion, where I refuse to ever develop a technique where I'm just a slave to the algorithm in a wang bar, where you just wang it, and then sophistication to that is you just brush it on a layer. I mean, I am just literally not interested in that. So because I'm not happy with the quality that produces, but I'm also very unhappy with the lack of repeatability of that too. And I also don't like software manufacturers having the jurisdiction over the quality of my images, because if all you're doing is being a software jockey, well then Adobe are setting the tone of the quality of you can only be as good as the algorithms
but when you say it's not repeatable, that's the most attractive thing to me, because I shoot company headshots. So
you want to develop a style that you can just do that.
And if the company employs someone, and I go and shoot them in 6 months' time, I need to give you the file and get back the file as if it looked like it was shot on the same day as everyone else. So I need to shoot it with the right lighting, with the right all of that.
That's the thing. I mean, in the beginning, when I came from proprietary, high-end, multi-million-pound systems, and the fact that I was in my early 20s teaching and installing these things, it was like pinching yourself. Really? What? Me? And then I came onto the Mac, and I just went, oh my God, this is progress? This is crap. Because there's no workflow. And then, you're working with 4 or 5 different companies providing software solutions, and then the formats are not compatible, so you have to use a third-party format TIFF to be able to get an image from one to the other. I mean, it's bloody ridiculous. Luckily now we have a
capitalism.
But always learning from everything you do is really important. And so when I do something really good and I'm really happy with it, or my client's really happy with it, I need to be able to dissect and understand why it was good. Not just go, cool. Even more so when I screw up, I need to be able to unravel what I've done so I can understand the cock-up. Because usually hidden inside a cock-up is a really good invention. It's a cock-up in the context of that job.
Yes.
So what I always used to do when I used to teach people on a one-to-one basis or in classrooms, I'd say, you know, because people quite often, like for cloning, for instance, this is how people used to position their hands. They would have their fingers on Command Z.
Oh my gosh.
With the presumption that they're going to make mistakes, and then they would use the stamp tool,
Yeah.
because 2 out of 5 applications or 1 out of 5 applications of the cloning, you'll clone the wrong area, so you have to undo. That is a ridiculously stupid way to behave. To know that 20% of what I'm just about to do for the next half an hour
is going to be a waste
I'm
of time.
away.
Yeah, yeah.
There's got to be a better way. So what I do is I used to physically write them and draw graphs to show how a rip could be used so you could work in a way where you could actually pay for the system. You know, one of the systems in the early days of PostScript, I proved with a time and motion study that if we ever sold one of these collective systems of like 6 boxes, we would be bankrupting our customers because it was physically impossible to make enough money
to pay back the wasted
back.
time.
And I proved that it was possible. And obviously the managing director was not impressed.
Yeah.
I didn't do this in public because there was no internet at that time, but that caused him to go off and develop software to make
fix that.
The most expensive part of the system was the film plotter. And because RIPs and network traffic was so slow at that time, because processor speeds and computers were really like ridiculously stupidly bad, he went off and based on this stuff that I developed realized that the bottleneck to stop the flow was the rip that would have to rip the PostScript that came from Quark, and quite often it would then get errors, and then you have to go right back to the beginning and start the whole process again. So you'd be lucky if you get a set of films out of the film plotter. So we then developed, well, he then went off and developed multi-rip software, so it could toggle, so you could have multiple rips on one film output, so you can get more film out of that machine. So time and motion is all that I care about, is being cost effective with my time, whether you're professional or amateur. It doesn't impress me when someone holds up an image and says, hey, do you like my image? It took me 12 hours. You retard, you know, seriously. How could you, you know, you could have done
You're
that
not talking about my
minutes.
friend now, are you?
You could have done that 5 minutes, your friend.
Martin.
Of course not, of course not.
But he's doing that for pleasure. Some
That's
people
entirely,
do it for pleasure.
No, that's entirely
Some people
different.
do it
You
for
don't,
pleasure.
you know, you don't ingratiate. You don't, you don't improve the value of something by saying it took such a long time. And across the amount of lectures I've given at universities, and these poor kids have poured blood, sweat and tears into this work. And there's a basic principle in everything. The more you retouch, the worse you make it, but you're the last person that can see it. Because you're too emotionally connected to the work. You need to be dispassionate to be a good retoucher. So if you're the photographer, to me, you
which
have
is
to
also
be able,
why I outsource.
I mean, you know, some of the worst stuff I've ever seen is where the retoucher is the same person who took the image. And I'm not meaning that in a critical way. It's just you're blinded by your emotional connection to it. You need impartiality
because you're invested.
I say this nearly at every lecture I ever give. You know, how many people, when they are upstairs in that room where you do your editing, and then your other half is screaming downstairs, dinner's on the table, so and they're still screaming at you because you just want to finish this image, and you've worked on it for half an hour, or maybe an hour, or maybe 2 hours, and it's perfect, and you think, I'm just going to finish it, it's great, and you save it. And then it's left on the screen, you go downstairs, you have your dinner, and then you come back and you go, who the hell messed my image up? That's happened to literally every single person. That's bad practice. That's bad technique to me. And every time I feel that in what I do, I want to find out why. How could I have circumvented
How could I
that?
have stopped earlier?
I mean, Christ, for a lot of big agencies in London, I used to go in and do, one in particular, I used to be hired 1 day a month to go in and pull apart their work that they had done, the jobs where they just felt we could have done it better quality or we could have done it more efficiently. We used to get all the staff in and just get beer and pizza, and we used to just sit and talk about the thought process of how to do the work. And 9 times out of 10 it would be really stupid things. It would be, well, why did you do that in Illustrator, and why did you do that in Quark, or why did you do that in InDesign, when if we'd have done it in Photoshop here, that would have just given you more flexibility here. That means we would have been able to have reacted to the customer changing their mind a lot quicker.
And save us money.
It's setting the foundation for it, not just going, I've got to get that done, got to get that done, and not seeing the end game. So that's why I work the way I do. So my focus for my talk next week is what I've realised. Can I have my pen over there? Thank you. The actual pen for me, when I go walking, this pen is like, I suppose, a cigarette to smokers. You know, even if they don't want to smoke anymore, they might just want to
hold something.
For me, when I finish presenting at Photokino and I'm walking around and maybe looking, I'm going to have the pen in my hand, because this to me is as natural as breathing to me. And what I've realised is, and it's really important, it sounds really cheesy because it makes me laugh when I say it, but the conduit between the old and the new for me is this thing.
Okay.
Because if you pass me over that ridiculous mouse thing over there,
yeah,
it's an emotional connection, isn't it? The work that we do, right? So for you as a photographer, it's an emotional thing. I mean, it can be written up. To take a good picture could be a set of rules, but that's not going to feel good when you work that way. You might need to follow those rules to learn the process, but then you want to fly with the process, and then you just want to be able to go with your instinct, and that's an emotional connection to what you're doing. And it's very much the same for me when it comes to retouching. I see something that I want, or the client tells me what I need to do, or what they want me to do. We debate and argue sometimes, but you know, and I do. But it's you think what you want, and it's an expression.
Yeah.
That it's an emotional expression. And what I remember is the very early days of trying to convey that expression into Photoshop screen
with a mouse,
with a fucking mouse.
Well, it didn't look like that. That's a lot better than what it...
It's even worse.
Yeah.
You know, it had buttons, you know, and then you've got this claw hand, and then after like half an hour you're having to do this because of the strain and the repetitive strain injury that you're developing over a long period of time. And so because the EPC systems, the electronic page composition systems that I worked with way before PostScript, well, before PostScript, before Quark and Max and everything, they had a puck. It was a digital puck. So basically, we never did. We would have to airbrush with it, but it was hand-eye coordination. Whereas mice, you scoot things across the screen, don't you?
Yeah.
These tables were A1. It was like an A1 Wacom, and we used to put a huge negative or positive on there, and then you'd have a magnifying glass that would go on the crosshair. So when you put the box into the system for exactly where the picture's going to be, you were absolutely pixel perfect. So I was used to hand-eye coordination, where a cursor would go around the screen
and you're moving something
face my hand. And then when I then moved into this company that used Max, I was really uncomfortable. I'm trying to be creative with a whole new set of tools. But now I realise I wasn't frustrated with Photoshop 1, I was frustrated with the mouse. And then when they became resellers for Wacom, as soon as Wacom then had a product, then this thing came in, and then suddenly
you're holding a paintbrush. Yeah.
I can take from my experience all the things I've learned.
So much more natural. I mean,
and it's just so much more natural. So the focus of my talk next week is going to be the importance of that it doesn't matter how good you are with this. You are never going to feel the same using this as you ever can be with this. And then the other side of it, the most frustrating part for me, because obviously I've spent many years influencing people. That's why people hire you to do presentations, right? Because they know they're going to sell a lot more kit. Yeah. And
let's be honest.
That's the truth of it, right? So, so the amount of people who assume that if they buy the same kit as you, then they will assimilate your qualities. We've touched on that already. Okay, so the amount of people who would then go, I've got to get one of those. Which size do I get? Do I just get the big one? No, not at all. You get either the small one or you get the middle one. Only a certain niche for me would ever need the bigger tablet. Even my friend yesterday who bought the large one, She actually held it up and showed me this tiny little scored
That's
area.
where
She
she
said,
uses.
I only use that part.
Yeah.
I wish I'd bought the smaller one or even the baby one. But my biggest disappointment is always when you influence somebody in a positive way to go and get something, and then they go and get it and then they don't use it.
To its full potential.
No, they just don't use it, because the problem is that when you've used one of these your whole life, and then you pick up one of these,
it takes a couple of days to get used to.
It takes a while, and if you leave the mouse on the table at the same time, when you run into difficulty,
you just
humans
default.
being following the path of least resistance, we go back to that. And the amount of customers I would then see either the same show next year, and I go, hey, did you get the Wacom? Yeah, I got it. So
still in the cupboard.
Well, and then they go, I use it for airbrushing. And I go,
because you can use,
you use it for everything.
Yeah.
And I realised, and speaking to Martin, who was on yesterday, in the last podcast, who works for Wacom, he said, I'm not going to say exactly, it's a percentage which you wouldn't actually believe. I'm sure he said, I don't know if you're still there, Martin, but I'm sure I remember you saying that something like 80% of people who buy a Wacom don't fully engage with it. And that is soul destroying for me.
It is soul destroying for you, and I can understand that, but people buy cameras and they don't use 80% of the functions. I teach workshops and people go away and they do one thing out of the 10 things I've told them.
Yeah, but that's different of taking a portion from it, but they don't ever use it again. And then I used to go to their studios and then you'd see the Wacom and it's up on the shelf collecting dust, or worse, it's in the drawer.
So you need to have some sort of rule.
I came up with a strategy.
Give me your mouse.
Well, then the same thing as I was saying before. Why does that happen? Instead of just saying this percentage, buy them, and they never adopt the use, well, that's a problem that can be solved.
Yes.
So I put a lot of time and effort into trying to study and understand why so many people would buy it with such enthusiasm, and they're not cheap. It's a utility to your machine. Your machine comes with this, and then you're replacing this with something like 400 euros or something, so it's not like throwaway money. And then for some reason the connection isn't made. So I concentrated a lot when I was doing the Australian tours, because I was working with Wacom. They would market a lot of my tours over there then, and I met with a lot of the development people and stuff, and who hated me because my strategy to make it so that you fall in love with it and it just becomes an extension of you is to turn off 99% of the shit that it does when you install it.
Yeah.
Because that's what I've realised is the thing that causes the most difficulty of the predictability of how it works. So I'm going to be teaching all that next week, and I'm so looking forward to it. I'm so looking forward to it. So all my techniques are based around when I'm building, like the eyes. Yeah. Next week I'm doing.
It's about emotional connection.
We're going to do a big part of the presentation is these techniques I've got for enhancing eyes, because cameras compress eyes. So because every camera has a compression within it to try and make a tiny portion of the detail facsimile, but to do that it has to compromise highlight and shadow, and it compromises shadow by a great deal. So there's this shape of a compression curve in every camera. That's why you can't take a picture of a landscape and get the sky and the trees at the same time, even though the data is in the raw file. Cameras put a compression curve on to make it a consumer-based product, where they need to be shot for doing that. It's why they don't put in a bloody expert setting where you can turn off that compression curve and give people who know what to do with it the choice. It is beyond me. So the biggest downside for portraits for me is that eyes are always dead. And they're not dead and there's nothing as a photographer that you can do about it. There's nothing, because you can't arrange, you can't influence the compression curve in a camera by changing your lighting.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. So when you shoot to get the highlight detail...
Was this happening in film as well?
Yep.
Okay.
But it was just taken for granted that was just how it was.
Oh, and you couldn't do anything about it?
There was very little in the sophistication of the systems. Quantel paint boxes could probably do something with that quite easily, but they wouldn't be able to do it in the way that I do it using Photoshop. And so I kind of specialise in that. So one of the images you gave me that I'm going to use next week is just perfect. It's the dude in the suit.
Oh, yeah.
And He's got great eyes in the sense that he's got tons of colour in there, but it's dead. It's it's shot perfectly because you shoot for the highlights, right? So from that point of view, you shoot it to the book, you get the highlight detail, and then all you then see is this compression of lack of hair detail. But you see it in the hair a lot more because obviously it's a larger area that you can see, and the eyes, because they're in the same part of the dynamic range, they're affected too, and I don't like them to be like that. So I've built a recipe of how to treat eyes but still leave them looking perfectly natural, because I don't like anything to be overcooked so it looks cartoon, or it looks like somebody's just wearing the slider. And in really thinking about it in the last month, since I've been thinking about this, I've realised that I only developed my techniques around the fact that I use this. Because if this didn't exist and I had to use only this, I would never develop techniques the way that I do. Because who wants to brush it in by going?
Yeah.
And then the worst thing, you're brushing or you're doing the cutout, and then you reach the end of the table. The end of the universe. So actually,
when you've finished working on those images at Photokino, please will you save a couple? Because I know that
I'm not. I love
you need to save a couple. I just love. I would, just to understand the philosophy behind things, and hopefully I will be there too. I'm probably going to.
I hope you come.
Yeah, I'd like to attend. But it's really interesting to see the level of intricacy that is involved from that, because, like I said, in terms of being a specialist, and I don't know any photographers that do their own post-production that are as passionate about it as you are.
I don't think and it's no way to degrade anybody at all or be detrimental to anybody. It's like everything, you can, because you qualified this, who is a photographer, define a professional photographer, because that can be somebody who just gets paid for what they're doing. Yeah. That doesn't qualify that what they do is good.
No, not at all.
Okay, and that's the whole point. So the way I've looked at the world of photography for a long time is that I've known, because I've taught so many people who used to be something else.
Yes.
Okay, so there are so few vocational photographers. Who was I talking to today? I was talking to my friend David today, who I need to get on here, but the world needs to meet David.
Yeah.
Honestly, man. There's no way that I could have any more love for a man,
a human being,
than David. And he was telling me about a young 6-year-old that he was playing with as a family friend connections. And he remembers swinging around this little 6-year-old playing in the garden. And he said to the 6-year-old, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" And she said, "I'm going to be an airline pilot." And that's not what you think of a girl, 6-year-old, probably 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah. And what is she today? And what has she only ever been?
An airline pilot.
I would love to be somebody who knew what they wanted to be when they were 6. I never had a clue. Do you know what I mean?
I never had a clue when I was 28.
Exactly. Most people never know what they want to be, but you know what I mean? It's like
even now, for me, I'm at a little bit of a crossroads. Call it midlife crisis, call it whatever you like. I'm just looking for purpose, like a deeper purpose, because I think I'm at that age now. I'm 47, and as much as I have loved photographing weddings and I've only, since moving from photographing people who have been shot or maimed or whatever, since I've been shooting professionally on my own after leaving the police force, I've just been surrounded by happy people. Yeah. Because you never get employed to do something that's negative, or So I'm really thrilled with the fact that I've been surrounded by happy things. Even if you get divorced 3 years later, I don't see that part. But the teaching side of things for me has really struck a chord with me in terms of legacy. Because I think when you start to get to a certain age, you start thinking a little bit about legacy. A friend of mine who was really there for me at my darkest hour. I mean, I was an alcoholic. I was doing drugs. I was at 24. I hit rock bottom, like absolute rock bottom. Well, I suppose when you say rock bottom, I'm talking to the wrong person in terms of.
No, but you know what?
Yeah.
when you say, yeah, and I was doing drugs and everything, and then obviously now you see it in a context, so that was a bad thing. And there's me wanting to start my career,
yeah, but
which I'm going to be.
Yeah. You know, I've got a mate who was there for me at my darkest hour, and this year he had a tumor. And I'm like, whoa, that kind of, you start thinking about mortality and all sorts of things. And then he's fine now.
Yeah.
But now you start to think about legacy, and it's very nice to be around people who are getting married and to take their money from them to give them beautiful pictures. And I don't have any issue with that. But I'm not really having a major impact in their lives. I'm providing a service, I hand over the product, and I get paid for it. But the education side of things for me...
Yeah, well, that's different.
Wow, man. Yeah. That's such a rush. And it's so... I hate the word humbling. It's so humbling when this, and this. I just feel that it's one of those... It's one of those words like, I'm so blessed.
Yeah, but it's when it's used in a divisive
in the right
manner,
context,
in a divisive manner, then I think then that's really bad. But it is humbling, massively.
There was a guy in Ghana who came on my workshop 5 years ago, and literally implemented every, like verbatim. He hung on every single word. And when he came to my workshop, it cost him a small fortune in terms of what, you know, for me it was, okay, I've got 15 people on the workshop. You know, I'd like to have 18, but I've got 15. It's one of those. Yeah. And he was on Ghanaian radio, and they recorded the interview. This was like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. His name was Bahati John Bosco. That's his name, John Bosco. I think he's like, that's phenomenal, like Bahati John Bosco. What a wonderful, loving, incredible man. And listen to this interview, and I could hear everything that I've taught him coming through his mouth. This guy's opened 4 studios in Ghana. He's employing, you know, 5 photographers in each studio. Each one of those families, and I'm not saying that I'm like, look at what I've done.
Yeah, but you're a part of it.
I look at that and I go, that is so cool. That is so cool that, you know, and if I shot someone's wedding, it's nice to have gotten the money for that, and I'm glad that I got paid to do a job. But from a legacy point of view, when I die and I want to be remembered as somebody who changed somebody else's life for the better. And I know that sounds all romantic and that kind of thing, but if you've ever been in a very dark place where you don't think you could get any lower, to be almost at the antithesis of that, to be in a position where it's a privilege to be able to have some sort of positive impact on somebody's life. That's like, wow.
Yeah, look, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I mean, but the thing is, I mean, everything comes with age. Because I don't think you thought like that when you were starting your career in the police force, right?
No, not at all.
Of course you didn't. It's hedonistic, it's feeding your the chemicals in your body at the time, which are telling you to do a whole bunch of things, which dissipates as you get older.
Yes.
Or we learn to manage it.
Yeah.
And then you get the beauty of being able to look back and just go, yeah, okay, things happened, and maybe some good things and maybe a few bad things, but you learn that they don't define you today. They were you yesterday.
Well, they got you to where you are today, so you need to embrace those.
You know, I've said, you know, I'm in a very similar, I think we're always in a similar position. It just depends on whether you recognise it or not. Of what to do next, or where to go next, how to move things into a different position, or just evolve things next. Do you carry on? Do you do something different? Blah, 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 blah. I have many thoughts of, you know, at times, you know, what if I don't do this and do something else? What would I do?
All right. So very quickly, you win the lottery. You don't have to.
Regardless of money.
No. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Money. You've got to take money off the table. What would you do?
Immediately call Mel Robinson. Oh. I would call Mel in Belfast, and I would ask Mel if I could be an intern at a volunteer, full-time live-in volunteer at the seal sanctuary in Ireland, where I used to take the seals that I used to rescue.
That's what you do?
Yeah, that's what I would do.
That's so cool.
I don't know how.
Because that's a complete. I mean, like, nobody knows that about you, do they?
No. Well, the membership do, because I did a webcast a while ago. I did a webcast a few years ago when, you know, this configuration of kit was in Ireland, and I came on and I was really, really excited because I had a seal, a baby seal in my bath upstairs, and we rescued it in the morning about 2 hours before the live webcast went on. And and I also want to be a barista as well. I would do that in the evenings, or I'd do that. I'd do that as well. But yeah, I had this baby seal in my bath. We rescued it off the beach, and it was nearly dead. And I did that guy who got killed, the crocodile hunter man.
Yeah, Steve.
I just jumped on it and put the hood of my neoprene kind of all-weather
wetsuit,
and wrapped it up, put it in my friend's arms. I drove home. We put it in the bath, called the police, eventually got to the seal rescue people. I made every single mistake under the sun that you could make. I probably
nearly killed the thing.
I probably came close to probably killing it, you know, because I had no idea. I put it in this bath.
Intention.
I put it in this bath, and obviously it's a wild animal, and I was suddenly presented with, how many times in my life have I actually captured and been this close to a completely non-domesticated animal in my life? How many times? You know, living and growing up, and okay, I've travelled a lot, but I've never been this close to a completely wild animal that when I go near it, it wants to bite me because it's trying to protect itself. And then this bond grows between them because they're newborn pups. It's only been alive for probably a week, and then it gets separated from the mother, so it can't eat solid food. It has to drink milk, and it has no mother to drink from, so it's on death row.
Die,
And then you see these bloody seals, and you know, and they are the most adorable creatures. And then obviously, because they're juvenile, a bond forms with your voice and everything, and then they let you stroke it and stuff. And that's the worst thing you can do, because then you're domesticating them. So I think over a year I rescued 5 seals off the beach, because then once I did the first one, they said, look, will you go on the list so that when we get a report.
So you're a seal reservist.
So then you're a go-to person.
How cool is that for being in a pub and someone say, what do you do? Oh, I'm a seal reservist.
Well, I would, every time I took the seals down there, and there was 2 seals that I just bonded with like children, I mean, and I would go down, and I'd have to drive like 4 hours across the country to go down and do a visit to see these seals. And every time I went to the sanctuary, I was just at home. You know, emotionally I was at home. You know, and then you go in and then you see your seal, and then the bloody things remember your voice, so they can't see you because they're in a pen and they're like basking under the heat lamp or something like that, and then they hear your voice. And then they come up, and then then you talk to them and they turn their head like a dog, and it's unbelievable. And I rescued 5. One of them died in my bathroom. That was heartbreaking.
I can imagine.
That you go downstairs, you think you've done all the right things this time, and then you go downstairs, have dinner, and you come back upstairs, and the thing's got out of the bed, and I never heard it, and out of the bath, sorry, and then it was just dead on the floor. So we gave it a funeral, and in the sea and everything. But and then obviously once they rehabilitate them and get them back to where they should be, and they get them back to normal weight, then they would call you and let you know, because they always drive them back to the same part
same beach,
where they were caught. So they could maybe find the community that they were a part of, and then you get to open the cage and let them out.
That's cool.
And if I ever changed track, it wouldn't be. I don't think maybe that would be a permanent thing. Although while I was in Ireland, in the last year I was in Ireland, I really put a lot of thought in opening up my own sanctuary there and running it, as well as the business, and having it as another side thing. So that's what I would do. It's just amazing. So when I do eventually, because I can't run the marathon that I wanted to this year, but when I do run the marathon, and if you are still wanting me to do that long one in South Africa at Easter time, I'm up for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm more intrigued to see if I would just do that first. You know what I mean?
It's possible.
Just do that first and
but
bypass the other one.
Yeah, you're not allowed to though. You have to qualify for it with the marathon.
Okay, well I would just do a marathon anyway, just to do the qualification.
Yeah.
But I would want to do it and raise money as much as I can, and I want to make a movie about my time with it, just so that I can put attention towards them, because they're completely charitable funds. They get no state money at all, and so yeah, love them. I would be a part of that group in a heartbeat.
That's brilliant, mate. That's very cool.
In a heartbeat. So we're going to have to let go on that. But you're going to come back very, very soon. Because, I mean, Christ, we've only scratched the surface of the things that we talk about.
Yeah. Big things. Yeah. Big things.
And make sure you come to Photo Kingdom next week.
I'll do
my best. So, guys, we're going to have to go. Thanks for watching.
What do you use?
We'll see you next time.
Ron's asked a question. What do you use?
Oh, what do I use?
Are we talking about drugs again?
No, that's somebody asking Ron a question.
Oh.
So he said, Greg, the guy wants to be a barista.
No, I thought he was asking what drugs you use. Okay.
Yeah, well, I've got a guest coming on where we're actually going to be talking about hallucinogenics.
Yes.
And he's a wedding photographer that I met in that cafe that I was at the other day.
Really?
When we was at that cafe today.
Yeah.
I met him in there about 6 weeks ago.
Wedding photographers everywhere, right?
He's a wedding photographer. You would never, if you look at him, you would never dream in a million years. You would just think he's a yoga expert or spiritualist or something.
Yeah.
He's such a cool guy, and he said he wants to come on, so I'm going to try and get him on. I don't know him very well, but I want to get to know him through it.
Have a giggle.
And but he's let's just say he's got knowledge of something that I'm investing a lot of time in, and so that will be hopefully, won't be next week because that's in Germany, but the week after.
All right.
But I'm also, just for people, if they ever wanted to be on this, because I don't want to do what I've seen other people do, where they only get kind of, in a sense, like star names and stuff. Yeah. I just want this to be real, normal, just like me, normal, everyday people. No celebrity shit.
Yeah, and what I like about it is that it's not really...
There's no format, just talk.
It's just a conversation.
See where it goes, and it's honest, you know?
Without pretense or...
So I know that trying to make it so that I only do this in person when I live in Utrecht, when nearly everybody else I know doesn't live in Utrecht. It's a really big ask to get people over, and Soraya flew over specifically just to do this. Yeah. So that hats off to her. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Skype one. Okay. So if anybody's interested in kind of just being on it and just getting to know me through a live podcast, then just let me know. Send me an email. Send me a message.
But before you hit the stop button, I'm going to do a plug for you that if you want to see Guy in person, Photokina next week.
And no money changed hands on that at all.
No money changed hands.
No, it's going to be good fun. It's going to be really cool. I'm really, really, really looking forward to it. Yeah. So, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Cool.
We'll leave it for a minute. So,
thanks, mate.
Thanks, buddy. Nice one. Hey.
Good job.